So we just had a great substantive report from Jerry, and now we're going to digest that, unpack it, pick your metaphor and verb. Thank you to Blake Jones from Politico, who's a fantastic moderator today. We also have Gabe Petek from the Legislative Analyst Office, Malia Cohen, our state controller, and Joe Stephenshaw, who, and actually I have a little bit of trivia about each one of these. Blake, Gabe, and Joe are repeats. They came last year and were so fantastic that we wanted to make sure you were part of our program. Thank you. And Controller Cohen is first time here, and we're grateful to have you. But I will tell you, I've been on many nonprofit board calls and other meetings where she always shows up in person. She might be in a car, not the one who's driving, on screen to make sure she's engaged and in that conversation, or in person for those, for which I am very grateful. We're grateful to all of you for the time, and I'm just going to turn it right over to you, Blake. Take it away for our next session.
All right. Thanks so much, Catherine. Thank you all for joining us. We're really lucky to have such a strong panel during such a busy stretch of budget negotiations this year. So, yeah, thank you all for joining me. I'm just going to try to get right into where we're at in budget negotiations. Joe, I think you probably have the best insight into, where things are at in the blow-by-blow right now. Do you mind filling us in on, where things are at in reaching a three-party agreement between the legislative chambers and the governor right now?
No comment. Thanks, Blake. Obviously I can't get into too much detail at this point. What I will say is, and you may talk a little bit more about this in detail as discussion goes on, but we do appreciate that both houses of the legislature kind of have followed the May Revise approach to not only ensure that we have a balanced special fund for economic uncertainty in the budget year, but also we're balanced in budget year plus one. That was really important to the framework of the governor's May revision and to the governor as part of the final budget. So we appreciate that the legislature also felt that that was a worthy approach. In addition to that, also, and I know that Gabe will talk about this a little bit later, but also making significant progress in addressing some of the issues we're seeing in the budget structure throughout the multi-year and really reducing our structural deficits by a significant amount. At the May Revise, we're reduced them by a little bit over half. And so we appreciate that the legislature has taken similar approaches. We expect that obviously the legislature has to vote on the budget by this coming Monday now, and so we expect that whatever happens then will follow that overall framework. And given that, we're optimistic about the ability to come to a three-party agreement on the final budget.
Yeah, is there an issue where you feel that the sides are particularly far apart at this stage?
I wouldn't say far apart. I think that there was a assumption regarding revenues that was in the budget from the houses, and that's something we'll definitely have to continue to discuss. Obviously, we have our May Revise forecast, and that's typically what the budget framework is based on, and so that's one issue that we'll have to resolve as we're finalizing the negotiations.
Gotcha. Gabe, I want to go to you for a second. You and your office this year have issued, but I think there's some pretty strong warnings about the endurance of the kind of AI boom that we're seeing, some of these initial public offerings that are coming up that Jerry was talking about earlier, and the how much the budget can rely on those. I'm wondering as these negotiations are playing out, if you feel like the warnings about that and the out-year deficits the state might be facing in a couple of years here, if they're being heard and if they're resonating.
I'm not in the best position to know whether or not they're being fully heard. We have made those points. We have some concerns about where the market levels are. Price levels are quite high. They're comparable by various measures to other peak points in history when the market has been at a peak. What we've seen is that oftentimes when, or some of these really dramatic peaks that have occurred in the past, we don't come down from that easily. There's usually a dramatic reversal. And California's tax revenue structure is so sensitive and so correlated with the equity markets that our office has really viewed the current situation to be one that, you know, we should do our best to build up state budget resilience with the surge in revenues that we've experienced in the last couple of years. And so, you know, that has been some of the advice or recommendations that we've put into our analysis. So the main thing is that if we experience the kind of downturn in the stock market that we saw even in 2022, where the market was down by about 20% for a few months, the tax revenues experienced about a $65 billion shortfall relative to the forecast at the time, and yet we kind of have made some comparisons to the current market situation to the dot-com experience when we look at some of the metrics or price-to-earning ratios and things like that. And if you had a similar downturn now with that, you could experience something even more drastic, like a $100 billion revenue shortfall. And so we think there's significant risk in the markets and the revenue situation. Of course, we can't indicate exactly when. I'm always reminded that in 1996, Ellen Greenspan described the stock market as in the midst of irrational exuberance. But of course, the market went on to double before it went down. So, you know, keep that in mind too, that we retain a lot of humility about our ability to forecast that.
And, you know, obviously the administration did come out with a revenue proposal in the May revision. Particularly, I think the state Senate, you know, has had a couple of revenue proposals, including one, you know, to basically raise taxes on companies that have large shares of employees on Medi-Cal. I'm wondering, is there one that's been discussed that you all see as, you know, as least risky, for lack of a better term, you know, given the kind of ups and downs of the state's revenue?
Without getting too far into the proposals that are being negotiated right now, I mean, we do agree with what Joe alluded to, which is that the revenue proposals from the governor are permanent revenue proposals to limit the corporations from using tax credits to some degree, and broadening the sales tax base a bit to include pre-written software packages. And those permanent revenue changes do help shrink the structural deficits that we have been cautioning about for several years. In fact, back in January, you know, the multi-year forecast from Department of Finance indicated there was a $20 billion annual structural deficit going forward. Our recommendation at the time was for the legislature to try to shrink that by about half now, and recognizing that it's difficult to eliminate a structural deficit of that magnitude in one fell swoop. And much to their credit, you know, the administration's May revision did include policy proposals, including the revenue changes that we're mentioning here, that would help shrink that deficit by about half. So, I mean, our first advice in our analysis of the May revision was that the legislature should retain that amount of structural deficit reduction. Whether or not they want to change the components of it, you know, that's one thing, but we really think that amount at least should be retained.
Controller, I was wondering, you know, your office just, you know, put out an audit right before the May revision, and, you know, I was wondering if you've seen, you know, any impacts of that so far on the budget talks. You know, I know your office worked with the Department of Finance on that, and yeah, I was just wondering if you've seen anything come out of that.
I'm so glad you asked. Good morning, everyone. My name's Malia. I think it's very apropos that I'm sitting in between these two guys. Think about a rose between two thorns. And I have the answers, at least the answers as reflects last year's budget. So I just want to do a level set and just talk a little bit about the ACFR. The ACFR is the annual comprehensive, help me out here. Cash financial report, thank you, the ACFR. And this is, for the first time in 8 years, lawmakers, taxpayers, you, everyone in this room are receiving the state's audited financial picture before a major financial decisions are made. So I am here to tell you, and we brought nice little takeaways for you to read up on your ACFR, because it's really good reading. That the report carried an unmodified audit opinion, and that is incredibly important because it means it's clean. That means that it's been validated and verified, and it's been verified by independent auditors. And this financial statement, it just fairly represents the spending of last year. Now, the reason why it is important to know where we went last year in order to dictate where we will go in the future. See, the policy beliefs and the direction that the governor is providing, and then ultimately the legislature, is aspirational. My role in the middle is to be the grounding anchor to say, this is what we did last year, this is where the spending was. Then the most important question is, did we do a good job in the allocation of funding? Did we reach our goals? Did we hit our milestones? And this is important because the ACFR has not been on time before the May revise in a number of years. When I took this position 3 years ago, we were behind. And so the team and I made it a priority to produce the ACFR in a timely manner. And one thing that the ACFR does support is that the revenues remain strong, and it's definitely driven by the market activity. The technology sector is incredibly important to our health and well-being. California reported nearly $596 billion in audited revenues, and then approximately $583 billion in audited expenses during fiscal year 24-25. And that's important because it informs our decisions as we talk about the budget this year. If you think about your own personal budgets, you like to know what you spent last year so that you can budget for the future coming years. And so, what's your name again? Gabe was right on the fact that that there is a structural imbalance. And one thing that we do on a monthly basis is the SEO issues a cash report. And we've been issuing the same cautionary warning for about a year now that revenues are higher than expected. Expenditures are also higher than expected, and we'll probably dive deeper into the reasons why the expenses are higher. But we are at a structural deficit, and we do need to make some changes. Otherwise, the government that we know and love is just not going to be sustainable, and we will no longer be able to prosper as a state.
Yeah, was there anything else other than the expenditures outpacing revenue that gave you, if not alarmed, gave you some cause for concern?
I wouldn't say it gives me cause for concern, but people should know that Health and Human Services is 51% of the state budget.
Did you have some thoughts on the ACFR? Am I getting that right?
That's
okay.
right.
ACFR? Or,
It should be a daily household name. Yeah. I need you all to report on that so everyone knows about the ACFR.
It used to be called the CAFR. So, but when I was just going to weigh in briefly here that in the job I had prior to becoming the legislative analyst, I was a credit rating analyst for S&P. And I was assigned to cover the state of California. This included through the Great Recession and the years after that. And I will just say that from the standpoint of the creditors, people that invest in the state of California's bonds, the delayed ACFRs were a point of concern. That's a document and data and information that they really rely on. They rely on it for the purpose of a lot of the analysis that they do is looking at ratios and debt levels and different metrics that they take into account, financial measures, and they compare them to other states. And when you're comparing other states from, fiscal year 2023 or 2024, and the most recent numbers you have from California are several years behind, it really was creating some concern in that community. And so, of course, to the extent that the lack of that information weighed into their analysis, it could have the effect of costing the state of California more in interest costs on the debt when they go to the bond markets to borrow. So I really do think it's a notable and important thing that the state controller has achieved in getting the document out in a more timely fashion.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Gabe.
I think Joe has some thoughts.
Yeah, I just figure that the crowd wants to hear even more about the act first, so I wanted to make sure I chimed in a little bit too.
Got to give them what they want, Joe.
Yeah, sure do that. I maybe just from my vantage point, and first just to acknowledge that the controller made this a priority when she took over office, and I think first met with me and expressed that, and have to commend her for the work that was done over the last couple of years to have timely reporting of our financial statements. And just to add a different perspective of what Gabe was just saying, we at Department of Finance, we have to meet with all the rating agencies numerous times throughout the year, and it's always a question that has popped up since I've been in this role in regards to when we were going to be able to report and the concerns over time of reporting. So it really is a big deal for the state. And lastly, I would say even probably more so during these times when we have increased scrutiny from some folks from outside of our state.
Definitely. And, this could go to anybody, but I was wondering, I mean, the DOGE efforts are over, but, the Trump administration certainly has taken this kind of public campaign of alleging fraud against blue states, blue cities to California, I think even more so this year. And I was wondering if there are other ways that that you all are thinking about trying to kind of combat that image and counteract some of those kind of allegations on like a more of a public facing front. And yeah.
So what you're seeing is the federal government has taken a different approach on how they're attacking California. In the Trump first administration, he was very litigious, and we sued the federal government on behalf of taxpayers. What you're seeing now is the Trump administration is taking taking down the lane of going through auditing. And so there are federal audits, there are federal dollars that have come in, and they have audited. The state controller's office has participated in the audit. We give the federal government the information, and then that is how our relationship works. To answer to your question about how do we move forward or move beyond, one of the things that I'd like to see is us being a little bit more proactive and thoughtful about our own audits, ensuring that the 201 agencies have the internal controls that are needed in order to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And so I anticipate more attacks that the state of California is going to receive from the federal government, specifically the Trump administration, based on and solely predicated on audits. So I believe that we need to be thoughtful about audit functions. So I say that the legislature and the governor should give the state controller's office more money so that they can beef up the auditing functions for the entire state of California, thus staving off a lot of these audits that are mean-spirited, quite honestly, and we can solve a lot of the problems that we have internally and by being more focused.
Did either of you have thoughts on that one? No pressure.
Yeah, I'll just say within the administration, we have really been focused on, one, understanding what we are doing within our programs to ensure that the programs are being run efficiently, effectively, and there are the appropriate steps that are being taken to mitigate risk, particularly of fraud. We have within our agencies and departments different auditing functions internally, and we've where we've seen gaps, we've really been working to address those. obviously, and as the controller alluded to, a lot of what we're facing is politically motivated, and so that makes it a little more difficult to really be on top of exactly everything we need to respond. But we're doing the best that we can to ensure that regardless of what attacks come, that California is ready and best positioned to respond and protect the programs and particularly federal resources that programs rely upon in our state.
Well, yeah, when I go out with my friends on the weekend who don't work in politics, there are two things that they want to talk about, and one is, audits and the ACPR, of course. And the second one, of course, is the Board of Equalization. And Controller, you're a member of the Board of Equalization, of course, your friend Fiona Ma has, in her campaign for Lieutenant Governor, she has advocated for getting rid of the board, and has basically, and to paraphrase, called it obsolete. And I was wondering if you've talked with her about this, like what you think about that proposal, and if you think it's a necessary body.
Yeah. Well, like you and your friends, we do talk about the ACFR. We talk about the Board of Equalization. She and I have differing opinions on the Board of Equalization. For those of you that don't know, she served, I think, was it 8 years on the Board of Equalization? I served 4 years on the board. As the controller, I am the 5th member on the board, so I served 4 years as a Board of Equalization member, and now 3 years as the state controller on this body. And I firmly believe that the Board of Equalization is incredibly relevant. It's important, I think, when you dive deep and you have a deep level of understanding about the role it plays in government, that it is significant. The Board of Equalization sets the rules and opines on any gray area when it comes to the assessment of property taxes. Property taxes is the second most highest revenue generation for the state of California. Do you not want oversight? Of course we want oversight. Elected officials to provide that level of oversight accountable to the public, I think, is incredibly important to a strong democracy. So I support her in her endeavors, and she supports me on my endeavors, but we disagree, and there is room enough in this relationship for us to disagree, but I do believe that the Board of Equalization is relevant, more so today than ever before. When I think about the fires, when I think about just the structural property damage that is occurring on an annual basis, and how that is destabilizing and needs, you do need a body that is an expert when it comes to the property taxes, and also while keeping the railroads and the utility companies honest about their assessment, because if there is a loophole, they will find a way to go through it. And so having a good large body of work, providing letters, LTAs to taxpayers, to taxpayer advocates. I mean, this is an incredible body of work that deserves public scrutiny and attention. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks for that. Obviously, we're also entering a key stretch of ballot measure negotiations this summer, and some of those I think are at least related to the state budget, particularly the wealth tax, sometimes called the billionaire's tax. That appears like it's going to be on the November ballot, absent some kind of deal. Joe, I was wondering if you might be willing to talk about whether you or the administration have recently, been in any kind of talks with the proponents, since it is so related to some of these revenue proposals that are being proposed.
I'm unfortunately, I don't think I can get into that line of discussion in my role. But what I can say is that we work with the LAO on the fiscal analysis, and that we are concerned about the long-term impacts to the state, in particular from the structure of the initiative that will likely result in increased revenue in the short term, but will then have a situation afterwards, partly depending on how that revenue is managed, of a potential cliff and also likely some ongoing revenue loss to the state. And so from a state budget perspective, we are concerned about how that particular initiative might impact the state's budget.
And I'll just jump in here. Joe's correct that in the fall, when before the measures go out for signatures, where the folks are outside of the grocery store getting signatures, his office and my office jointly work on an initial fiscal letter that estimates the fiscal impact to the state. And then once it qualifies for the ballot, our office will provide the fiscal estimate that goes into the voter information guide. I just will say, Joe articulated very good points. I would not describe our office as concerned or not concerned. Those are the factual things that Joe said are absolutely right. It's just that given our role on the measures and our work on behalf of the voters, we remain steadfastly impartial about as to the merits of the measures in either direction. So I just kind of weigh in and say that.
I'd like to weigh in as well. So what I've done as the controller is assemble a group of economists, and it is an economic council. It's actually headed by Dr. Nicholsberg, and we will be convening. One of the first things I asked them to do was to review the proposal that voters are going to be taking a position on in November. And somewhat to what Gabe was saying is, I am looking from looking at this initiative from an empirical data perspective. What do the numbers say? So this economic body of advisors and counselors are making up the full spectrum of California, the political spectrum. So it is not dominated by Democrats, nor is it dominated by Republicans. We've got people from the Central Valley, Northern California, Southern California. We've got a very broad swath of intellectuals that study this for a living. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but we will be releasing something that you might be interested in looking at. But much like what Gabe was saying, I want voters to be able to make an informed decision, one that is void of any emotion, one that is void from any political affiliation, but understand that when it comes to the finances of the fourth largest economy in the world, that we need to be sober and we need to be clear-eyed and understand what our votes, how they will yield. You heard elections have consequences, and so I want everyone to just be informed about what is at stake, and also understand that a vote taken in November will have impacts for the next several years moving into the future that will impact our fiscal and financial standing.
Do you have a position on it?
No. But thank you for asking.
Gabe, as you mentioned, both you and the Department of Finance and it seems the Controller's Office also are trying to estimate some of the financial impacts of this measure. It would seem to a layperson like myself that it would be really hard to estimate how many billionaires are going to move out of the state in order to avoid a tax like this. I'm wondering if you can walk me through a little bit of the process of how you even try to put that into numbers.
Yeah, so remember what I said about humility. we keep that in mind. So in the fall period when they submitted to put this initiative out there for signatures, our office and Department of Finance arranged calls with both proponents and opponents, and we had a lot of meetings to try to get their perspectives. Our economics team does their own research. They do modeling on these measures. And the conclusion was that, or the estimate was that this would generate tens of billions of one-time or temporary revenue because the tax is a one-time tax, but it can be paid over the span of 5 years. And then, as Joe pointed out, we also estimated that it could cost in the hundreds of millions on an ongoing or permanent basis, the loss of revenue from those very high net worth taxpayers that would choose to leave the state. And, so that's what we put in the letter. And even though those are pretty broad buckets that I just described, the teams, along with finance, we do a lot of work just to arrive at that. And we think it's very important to be upfront with the voters. Like, we don't want to convey false precision, right? We don't have a way to know exactly what the behavioral response will be. In this particular measure, the taxpayers would have to have left the state before January 1st of this year, as it's written. We don't, really know exactly how that shakes out. And then also, of course, there's the possibility that some people would move out of the state even after that, just because of their feelings about this or how they view the tax environment. So there's a lot of uncertainty in this work, and so we just try to build that into the ranges that we develop.
I was going to also add that the economic councils that I have assembled is going to be looking at that, being able to actually quantify how many billionaires are there in the state of California, who qualifies, and who will actually leave, the likelihood. So we are working on doing the data modeling and studying that in a very deep way. The other role that I also sit on is I chair the Franchise Tax Board. And so the Franchise Tax Board also has an incredible amount of data. And so we're going to be doing some data mining in that area as well to create a fuller picture as to what that impact will be. So stay tuned. There's definitely more to come. There's a lot of work. This is a very serious measure that will impact all of us.
Appreciate that. Joe, I'm wondering, are there any other ballot measures that you all are looking at in this kind of final stretch of budget negotiations that are on your mind with the fiscal impact? Obviously, some bond discussions that I'm mindful of, given where we're at. But yeah, any other ballot measures that?
So yes, so those obviously there's discussions around bonds, and we at Finance have been having kind of a lot of discussions internally assessing impacts recently. That's something that we always want to understand, not only what the debt service is going to be throughout the terms of the bonds, but also how it's going to impact our debt service ratio through that time based on the outstanding bonds and planned sales that we have now. So that's a big one from our perspective. I would also say, just for finance, we've been having some conversations, not a measure yet, but some conversations the last couple of years that have really been accelerating now with the legislature on some reform to Prop 2, which was the initiative that established the current rules for the deposits into the budget stabilization account, the state's rainy day fund, in 2014, and to make some reforms there to enable the state to save more money going forward, set aside more money in the rainy day fund going forward. When we do experience these spikes in revenue, I think one thing that we did learn from our experience over these last 4 or 5 years of going through the spike in revenues in 2021 and then the correction in 2022 that Gabe partially alluded to earlier, and 2023, and having the budget challenges that we've had the last few years. One of the big lessons was that some of the volatility that we knew we have can be more acute than we were expecting, and that we really need to better position ourselves to be able to capture more of that upside going forward. And so that's not on the ballot yet, but it's definitely for finance top of our mind, and something that we're really hopeful that we can work out with the legislature as we are finalizing the budget discussions this year.
Yeah, and I know the governor has talked a couple of times about the challenge of public opinion potentially cutting against some of these Prop 2 reforms. Like, I know he's mentioned polling in past years that might indicate there would need to be a pretty concerted campaign to convince voters to make some changes. I wonder if you all have noticed any changes there, or if you still anticipate that would be a tough fight at the ballot.
That's part of the discussion, is ways to craft it that I think that voters that would be perceived favorably by voters, and that's part of the discussion. It's important for us state budgeteers, I think, to be able to manage the state's resources going forward and provide stability that is needed to support programs. We don't want to find ourselves in the position that we found ourselves in the last couple of years going forward, and so we feel like it's really important. So it's a matter of how we craft it in ways that resonate with voters, and that's part of the conversation.
Yeah, is there something so far that you've noticed that you all have decided is, an element or a provision or language that would make it more palatable to voters that, as you've been thinking about that?
I mean, we do think that, just the concept of saving more during the upswings of revenue, we do think that is something that will, on the whole, be seen as a favorable change. The one dynamic, and I think that's come up and it's been part of some of the comments you may have heard from my boss, is that in order to do that, you have to likely address how the Ganlin is counted for the revenue, the funds that are deposited into the rainy day fund, and so that's where it gets, I think, a little complicated. But those are things that we have been thinking about, talking about, and for a while, and that I'm at least optimistic that we'll be able to come to agreement on the best approach.
I'm going to let Blake ask one more question, and then we'll have about 5 minutes. So be thinking of your deep, thoughtful question for our panelists. Blake.
Okay, just really quickly, I want to ask all of you: is there something that that you wish that the legislature was paying more attention to on the budget that has not been a focus of theirs? For anyone who might have a thought on that.
That you can share.
I'll take a stab first. I'll buy you some time, because I definitely wish the legislature would pay more attention to the ACFR. I'd like them to be. I am very serious. Would you? I mean, the ACFR is very important to the fiscal health and wellness of the state of California, and we laugh and we joke about it. But it is. Think about if there were no ACFR. You heard Gabe talking about how it impacted our bond rating. Think about the bond rating as your personal credit score, right? So in order for us to be credit worthy, in order for people to loan us money, borrow money to balance out our debts, we need that ACFR to be out and on time and to be clean. So that is something that I would like the legislature to pay attention to, because they are making decisions about a future budget, but I want them to understand where and how the spending has been allocated, and have they had impact in where they are spending. You hear some of the budget guidelines from the governor is no new programs, right? No expansions. Does that sound right? And there is reason for that. I would like them to be very knowledgeable about the structural budget deficit. What does that actually mean? How does that manifest on a daily basis? Where the decisions that we make today, what position is that going to put us in 5 and 10 years? I want them to have a long-term vision about the fiscal health of the state of California. I would also like an introspective look about California. California is the 4th largest economy in the world. We can do better with how we manage our money, our internal controls. So we spend a lot of time talking about raising more money and bringing more money in, but we don't pay attention to the guardrails and the internal controls that we have inside agencies and inside departments. And so we need to strengthen that muscle so that there isn't any waste and that money is not being lost or stolen or unaccounted for. If we were to tighten that would we would be able to save ourselves, 1, a lot of heartache, but 2, lost dollars. And so I would love for us to, again, clean up our own house, our own fiscal house, our own accounts, our own departments, and strengthen that so that we have the governance, the oversight, the guardrails that are needed to be put in place so that we're not losing out on money.
don't see anyone else jumping out of their seat to answer that one.
I'm going to jump in. Yeah. So I want to just say that I started with my accolades for the governor's proposal, where we would shrink that structural deficit. But there's also a part of the proposal that our office advises to not adopt, which is since last June, our state tax revenues for the upcoming budget year period have been increased by an estimated almost $58 billion, almost $60 billion. And part of the May revision proposal is to suspend the true-up deposits that would be required under the current Proposition 2 formulas. So we're not making, because when the revenues are going up by that much, it triggers a true-up in our deposit to the rainy day fund. And our advice to the legislature would be to not suspend that deposit, to go ahead and make the deposit, fully recognizing that introduces some tough decision-making on their part. And I do want to just make the comment that, we aren't just sitting here over at the LAO wanting there to be very high budget reserves for the sake of high budget reserves. The budget reserves play a crucial role in the state's ability to sustain very vital safety net programs and healthcare programs when we do encounter that downturn in the stock market or the downturn in revenues. It can soften the type of draconian cuts that would be necessary if we go into that with a smaller reserve and we're forced to make kind of blunt changes to our spending or make difficult tax increases right when the economy's in a dip or something like that. So that's one thing. I don't want to get ahead of where the legislature actually is on that, but that is one of our recommendations in our assessment of the current situation.
If you guys are interested in a monthly cash report, we publish it on the 10th of every month. We're going to be publishing it later on today. And that will give you a snapshot of where we are, how much money is in each one of these funds that we're talking about. So we talked about the rainy day fund. It's got about a little less than $87 billion, just to orient you.
Great. Joe, I don't want to make you not answer the question about what you'd like to see the legislature do, but I will go to audience questions if you're all right. So some questions that we have here. Thank you. I'm coming along. We have 5 minutes for them, so let's keep them short.
In the next recession, we are probably not going to get the support that we've gotten in past recessions from the federal government. What are the big risks that you see for California, and do you think that California is going to be able to deal with this lack of support?
Good short question. All right, go for it.
I'll start since I'm disappointed I didn't get to answer that last question. I will just say that it's been one of my biggest worries this last 2, maybe 3 years. Even prior to the headwinds that we currently are facing now, this last year, that we're going to face over the coming years from the current federal administration, California used a lot of its budget resiliency to deal with the revenue volatility that we saw from 2021 through 2023, and really put us in a fiscally vulnerable position, and is one of the reasons why we feel like it's important, and the May Revise was crafted in a way to really no new significant spending proposals, particularly no new significant ongoing spending proposals, and really focus on addressing the overall structure of the budget. And as Gabe mentioned, it's really important at the same time to start building back the resilience for the state, because what we went through, although we had a significant revenue shortfall, we were not in a recession, and that was kind of unique. And if we do experience a recession, because of the tools we use, the use of the reserve, other things that we had to do, we're not as well positioned as we were in 2022 to deal with that. And I think that just highlights the need to rebuild that resiliency and to strengthen the state's overall budget position now because we know that we can't predict when it will happen, but we know we will have downturns, economic downturns that will impact the state's revenue, and we have to just be aware of that fact and ensure that we're in the best position that we can be to deal with it, so we can avoid being in positions like we were during the Great Recession that led to some really devastating decisions that were made to get through that, and so it is. I know I'm not directly answering your question, but it's definitely top of mind. Definitely, what from the state's fiscal position should be something that we're all concerned about and working to be in the best position to mitigate once it does happen.
I'll just add one quickly that I think, even HR 1 from last summer shifted a lot of costs from the federal government to the state government. So we estimated that through the fiscal outlook period, which goes 3 years beyond the budget year, it would add $5 billion in cost to the state for just in the form of cost shifts, not to not the state backfilling reductions that they are that the law makes to programs, but to outright cost shifts in administrative and other types of costs that would be shifted to the government. The only thing I would say is I generally agree with your question about the impulse of the presidential administration in D.C., but at the same time, they've been big spenders too. I mean, they've actually, I see a lot of fiscal restraint, honestly. So,
Okay, we're going to
still
try to
no.
go to different sides of the room. And so Haley's got another question over here. We probably have time for this last one.
Hi, thanks so much. Zach Flowers with the Health Officer Association. Question for Controller Cohen. You mentioned that your maybe area of concern or area of keeping notice is HHS makes up 51% of the state budget. I just want to press you on that a little bit about what this room could take away from that information. Sorry if you can't hear me well.
No, I heard you.
And just because, as the three of you know better than anybody, right? Like, I mean, that's not necessarily the full picture, right? I mean, it's less than 40% of general funds, and the Californians' healthcare costs went up 10% at the turn of the year, and the cost pressures are coming from HR 1, right? At the end of the day.
Land that question. Land the
Boom.
question.
So what should we do with that information?
Thank you.
Okay, yes, and to answer your question, I was presenting a fact so that there's a base level, everyone knows how the budget is working out and where the top expenditure is. That's why I put out that fact about 51%. Also, I sit on CalPERS and CalSTRS. And one thing that I definitely see is an escalating healthcare costs. We're constantly in negotiation. These costs are going up. People are losing quality healthcare, and particularly in rural parts of the state of California. So I think that the legislature is going to have to begin to grapple with about health and human services. I mean, like, this is not a dig, but it's a reality that it is expensive. And anytime there's something expensive, when people are looking to make costs, they are looking in a well-rounded way where they can make these costs. They're probably going to be looking at the roles to see if people who qualify for Medi-Cal in particular, if they actually qualify. Do they actually meet the eligibility? Now, a few years ago, remember, we widened the eligibility, and so there are more people on the rolls. I don't know how the legislature is discussing that, but that is a huge driver and a long-term expense that I don't really see how we get from under it. We have to address it. It has to be discussed.
And I just
Joe Gabe.
add a little bit more there, and I think it's as the budgeters and the fiscal integrity of the state is part of my mission. It has nothing to do with any particular program or policy area. But when we just look at the where we're seeing the cost pressures of the state. The Medi-Cal program in particular has grown from, I think, around $22 billion, give or take, in 2019-20 to over $48 billion in the current year. And we saw, even prior to HR 1, that kind of growth curve just outpacing any reasonable revenue growth. And we saw similar growth in, although smaller total amounts in some of the other HHS programs. And so those are just the underlying facts that we have to understand how we manage that going forward, one way or another.
I'm going to jump in too, because I think that extending on the factual element of these responses here, since 2019-20, the general fund has increased its expenditures by $100 billion. That's 75% increase since 2019-20. And more than 2/3 of that has just been to sustain existing commitments. And then we've done some other things like expand programs. Almost all of the increase, the 80% of the increase is in Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services, and DDS, Department of Developmental Services. Now, these are really crucial programs, very crucial programs for the people that are beneficiaries of them. But the bottom line is, right now, as our office estimates it, the state of California has a suite of services that we provide that we can't afford. Our revenue base on a sustainable going forward basis does not support the level of services and programs that we currently offer. Now, there's two ways to respond to that, given our constitutional balanced budget requirement. The first would be one would be to reduce the goods, shrink the package that we offer. The other would be to raise taxes, or some combination of the two. But now if we raise taxes, then we run into the scan limit issue, and we would have to go to the voters because we have a constitutional limitation on how much we're allowed to spend. So there is a serious challenge before the legislature and the policymakers in our estimation, and it has to do with this question. I mean, your question is a very good one because I think it gets to like the fundamental challenge before the legislature and the governor and the next governor.
I will say that's probably answer to my question. It was, what would you tell the next governor they need to be working on next? So free answer right there. Please thank our fantastic panelists and moderator. Terrific conversation. Lunch is next. But wait, let me tell you how it's going to go. Those doors are going to open. There are 2 lines for the lunch buffet. We'll be back here in 15 minutes for a great fireside chat with Leanne Randolph and Camille Von Cannell from Politico. So 15 minutes back in the room. Thank you.